pantry. Now, the AAA doesn't necessarily fund the pantry, but I think it's important to know that many of the individuals that we provide access to nutritional, healthy food isn't necessarily in the way that we are producing it, creating it, and cooking it, but really giving the raw opportunity from our pantry for those that need that care. So we have that available as well. It's a kind of a sad state of affairs in some ways that we served in the past. I would say in the last 6 months, we had a membership of about shy of 1,100 per month of individuals. That's individuals, not families. I'll get to that in a minute, through the pantry. And more recently, 1460. So an additional 260 people are accessing, individuals are accessing. But one of the things you may not know is last year at about this time, we had 260 grandparents that were supporting grandkids through the pantry. And that has grown by an additional 140. So what that means is that we are providing support to not only grandparents and grandkids, and it's growing exponentially actually with the kiddos that we're supporting through the pantry. So it's just, I think, an indicator about where families are struggling overall and how Silver Key is working to be able to address those issues. In terms of struggle, one of the things that has been a primary focus of Silver Key is to we have been for a long time, but to really address the issue of isolation and loneliness. In the reports that we've received from the Department of Health, for the last 4 years trending, people over the age of 72, males that were formerly in the military, are the highest rate of suicide in Colorado Springs. And so when we have that rate of suicidality in older adults, and Silver Key and the AAA, all of the partners around, obviously that's a big issue. So all of Silver Key, and this is speaking to the counseling program that we have, but all of Silver Key staff and volunteers go through the full mental health first aid training so that we can recognize signs and symptoms earlier on, and then we are able to activate care. For somebody who activates because they need a level of clinical intervention, through our counseling program is where we do what's called a biopsychosocial. And really what it is, it's an inventory of health, an overall health psychiatrically, medically, and physically, to make sure that we've got the right plan in place to be able to help build the resilience of an individual. Resilience, termed another way, is hope. And what we do in our counseling program is we build hope, and we use a scale. It's an internationally recognized scale called the Hope Scale. And the Hope Scale has the statistically reliable, valid psychometrics behind it that demonstrates that we can actually gauge one's level of hope. And you may say, well, that's all like fun, especially around the holidays. Sure, we all love hope, right? But let me tell you what this actually means. In the independent study that we have of this, we're actually able to demonstrate that by increasing hope, we decrease ERU, emergency room, 911, and placement in skilled care before people need it. So hope is a contributing factor to health. And that is why our whole counseling program really does address the idea of what would it take and what do you need to help build the hope of you and your family and the resilience, because what we do is by bringing that level of support, we reduce that burden financially to the community and hopefully open up more opportunities for housing and for some other options. So it's really a proactive preventative solution. And we've been involved with the counseling program, the counseling support for many years. We offer grief support, social support, just a whole range of things that happen through that program. We're grateful for the support that we get from the AAA to be able to do all of this work. It's about a third of our funding that we have in our organization. The other third comes from donations, sponsorships, and other grants. I think I've shared this before with the RAC members, but just so you know, we have over 33 different grants that we work through on a regular basis. And that may seem pretty extensive for other nonprofits that maybe have a single line of service delivery, but because of the range of what we do, tapping into all those different resources is critical for us to be able to make ends meet. And yeah, I can go on and on and on, or I can stop and answer questions. So it's up to you. What would be your pleasure? Or just stop. But I'm good with that too. Okay.
You have a number of apartments that are going to be for veterans.
That's right.
And hopefully those veterans will attend the meal site that's there. And hopefully that, because they may have some friends, maybe you will get more veterans, senior veterans coming to that meal site. And I think as a group, we would be really interested in knowing that or finding that out.
Yeah,
So you
well,
can
Madam
give some
Chair,
feedback.
thank you very much for that comment. So what it is right now is of the about 11,000 people that we serve on an annual basis, 26% are either veterans or spouses of veterans. And so that's in our current service delivery. So it's not a small population, and it actually reflects higher than what is happening in the larger community. Many times people attract here, retire here, and as we know, sometimes all the benefits that they need don't necessarily correlate to all the expenses that they have. So Silver Key really does provide a level of support to a number of veterans. At this point, the up for our Connection Cafe location. And I suspect that'll happen is that we're going to get more people as it's located actually within the apartment, because right now it's adjacent to in the campus where it's in the second building. So we are thrilled about that. We will continue to grow that. And the other thing that we're doing is we're really celebrating our veterans in the apartments. If you do visit, and by the way, anybody can sign up for a tour. I have that available online too. Sign up. I'd be glad to give you a tour of the building. The intent around the 13 units was to represent the overall population we serve, but the reality is that we want to make sure we're honoring our veterans through companionship, through the not only the meal programs, but through our transportation, all of the design features that we have around the apartments. Some of you may not have been able to hear about some of it, so forgive me, but because you brought the veterans piece forward, oftentimes older adults that have served in the military have experienced being in theater, and there's a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder that can happen with that, triggered oftentimes by level of explosion or level of high energy. So if you go through the building, it's been designed through area agent, I'm sorry, not area, the other AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons, gave guidance on what design features would happen to be able to make sure that you outfit this from what's called a trauma-informed perspective. So all the rooms have been sealed to be able to be much more able to mute external noise coming into them, so that for those that have post-traumatic stress disorder from being in theater, that's not a triggering event for them. Also, similar to the artwork that's in here, I'm colorblind, so I don't know the colors, but I can feel the energy. The energy is great, but it's muted. And that's what's happened in all the contemporary art that we have in the building. You'll see it, it's beautiful, but it's from very basic colors, because even the level of energy that can happen from bright, energetic colors can trigger individuals because of explosions, etc. Every single design feature that we had in that building has been specifically geared to older adults and specific to veterans. The other piece I was sharing with one of the RAC members, Laura, that the cabinetry, she says, I love those cabinets. One of the things about the cabinetry is behind the cabinet, it's been set that what we would be able to do is actually gear and the Independence Center will love this, we will actually be able to gear the cabinets lower if we have an individual that gets to the point of where they're needing a wheelchair or they're needing other assistive devices, or simply like me, I'm getting shorter as I age. So with that, as that becomes a need, we will be able to actually outfit their apartment to be able to kind of manage through what their needs are for the long haul. That is one of the things that I think is on the cusp of the future, is that we cannot just solve the issue for today. As Melissa talks about frequently, we need housing, but one thing is that we need also smart housing. We need things to be available for the long haul, not just for the moment. And this was really designed for the long haul. So, boy, a lot. Nobody will say anything after that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another
Yeah.
question, but I think it probably would be better after the second part of the presentation, and I'm not sure who is doing that. Older American Act changes?
So since Jody is in DC right now, I think we're going to postpone that
Okay.
until our next meeting with
Okay.
more official.
Then I'll ask the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when it comes, I understand that home delivered meals greatly expanded because of rule changes when COVID hit. And I know that that's possibly going to be changing, although they're looking at that more carefully. So have you seen a decrease in people that
Yeah.
are eligible for home delivered
Yeah,
meals?
Melody and I have been talking about this for a long time. Is that what you're talking about is that during COVID, there was specific criteria that said that people that were sheltering in place qualified for the home delivered meal program.
They didn't have to have the exemptions that they weren't able to leave their house
Yes, ma'am.
to get a home delivery meal.
Exactly. And so now what's happened is that we have been been moving to expand the congregate meal sites for those that can get out and choose to get out. But we do have a gap in the middle, and we've been trying to work through some of those gaps with some of the individuals. So to answer your question, things are trying to get back to what it was, but kind of the new normal oftentimes is influencing kind of some of the decisions we're making. But we have tried to get those individuals that are able and capable and want to be back into the congregate sites.
And I understand that the rule changes in the meal sites may address some of that in the future.
In the reauthorization?
Yes.
Yeah, to have more flexibility with
Yeah.
both congregate and home
So
delivered
that
meal.
some people may still be able to get a home delivered meal even though they don't meet the original.
That is the goal.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I thought. That's what I was, so that's at your home delivery.
Literally an act of Congress.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
And hopefully that'll help with some of that gap, that
Yep.
middle group of
That's
people.
exactly right.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or issues that they would like Jason to address? Thank you.
Thank
Nope, I have some.
Oh.
I was just looking around to see
Oh.
if any of our RAC members were going to ask a few questions, but so I definitely have, I think, two questions,
Okay.
Jason. After being, so one is nutrition and one is counseling. So after being at the opening yesterday, which thank you so much. And, Jason talks, but what Jason says is so inspiring.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm going to just start crying. So thank you.
yeah.
Because it is fun to hear you share really good information and talk about all the good work, and to see all the people that showed up yesterday was also just really inspiring in and of
Thank you.
itself. And, to have a couple of residents just randomly holler out and be excited and want to get their words in too was also really fun. And I think one of them was probably a veteran.
Yes, that's true.
Speaking of veterans. So it was just, and there was no snow. You didn't have to freak out about sweeping away the snow. So it was great. And we did not get to stay there long enough. I was with Lucy and one of our other family caregiver people, and we had to run back here, but we actually were one of the last people to leave the parking lot anyway, because we did go tour the congregate meal site, and we saw your activity space and all of that. And what we saw in the congregate meal site was a grab and go cooler.
Mhm.
And so my first comment/question is, can you share a little bit about the grab and go coolers that you
Yeah.
have in that congregate meal site? And will those transfer over to the apartment building as well? Or what's going to happen with the grab and
Yeah,
go?
so thank you for that. The grab and go that you saw. So I'm sorry, I'm going to give a little bit of a story. So what happened is that my daughter is in the Air Force, and she was up in North Dakota, and she has this cat that she got reassigned to Hawaii, and this cat needed to be picked up. And I'm like, okay. So I drive from here all the way to North Dakota to pick up her cat. But then what happened? And you're probably thinking, Melissa, where's he going with this? So what happened at that drive is I went through South Dakota. In South Dakota, there is this most amazing Connection Cafe site, or the equivalent, a congregate site that I've ever seen. And what it is, it's a space and place that you can go to, and you feel like you are in like a. Has anybody been to Clean Eats? Like it's a place that's got a frozen program. It's got, you can come and get your meal there. It's a restaurant experience. It's a true restaurant experience. It's not feeling like you are going through a high school lunch line. It's a different kind of, and even when you drive up, it's got the Meals on Wheels banner, and it's just got this lovely way to do this. And so I went there and I thought, why not here? Why can't we? If South Dakota can do it, Colorado Springs should be able to. So that was the root of it. And then I thought, well, I don't know if we can even do the meal program. So what we did is we have this set up, Melissa, as a separate thing for the staff and volunteers that are part of a campus, where they can purchase the meal for $6. So it is not a companion piece. We don't do that. It's really a separate thing. And the way that we're able to do this is that we have the separate food set up for this. And then what it is, it's part of our social enterprise. So we don't give them milk and all of that. It's just the basic food. And that when we sell this to our staff and volunteers and all the campus partners, then we're able to bring that money back to our service delivery. So that's really the spirit behind it. And actually, Melody and I are going to meet a little bit after this that I want to give some ideas around that. So that's the context behind it. And I think it's just the start of where the change of where the future is in congregate sites, because I think that the AAA and the Older Americans Act, speaking of the Older Americans Act, when it was first established, aging was a very different paradigm than what it is now. So when we think and fast forward that the way people are living and how people are living is very, very different. And so when you have 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, maybe even 100, some of these individuals that are geared into they're geared into what is a restaurant like for me when I was 50? I don't want to go to a high school, service line. That may have worked 50 years ago or 30 years ago. It doesn't work for what my demographic is used to at this point. So that is why I think we're going to be evolving, and we're looking to hopefully some of the flexibility coming forward that will help us evolve. And I know that different states are doing some different things, and I think we could be on the front of it. There you go, Melissa. So my daughter's cat changed the way we do service down here.
Do they grab and go for an additional meal after, like after they eat at the meal site, or because you said it's staff, obviously.
You mean in South Dakota?
No,
Here they could buy an additional meal, but they don't. They usually are coming here for the congregate meal.
Mhm.
But that'd be great if we could get to that point where people do. I mean, it's certainly available to them, but I think because they get the hot meal at that moment, here's what I would envision. Melody, this is a little bit of primer to what we're going to talk about hopefully later. What I would envision is that if we had that frozen meal option available in the activity center, and then we would have the hot meal program available at the congregate site, so we really could cater to both who are really more comfortable picking it up and then getting into the Zumba class, and that's what they want to take with them, versus those that really don't maybe have that ambulation or that energy or that interest, and they want to go and sit for a hot meal. I would love for both of those options to be available at the Murray campus. And this is one of the things that I would like to see us be able to do. So the answer is yes, if we can get the kind of approvals we
And you
need.
said staff though.
Yeah, our staff,
Yes,
and many of our staff, unlike a lot of businesses, many of our staff are over the age of 60 and actually qualify for our programs. They still pay for, because I'm like, you can pay, but but they do qualify. And some of and we have our average age of a worker is 57, and that includes the fact that we have a 19-year-old. So he brings the age, but we do have an older aged workforce, and they do qualify for some of our benefits if they needed to.
Super. Great.
Well, thanks. And then my next question is about the counseling program that you guys have. And so I guess I have two questions. I know I'm not clear who the folks are that you have doing the counseling, because I know at one point in time you were partnered with UCCS, but then I know that you ended up hiring kind of your own therapists. So I'm just kind of curious what the staff kind of looks like there nowadays. And then the second question is, as we look at trying to streamline referral processes across the region, back by the yellow books, we have the flyer that I created that kind of shows all of the services that the Older Americans Act funds until there's a wait list. But what does the referral process look like for a person to potentially get counseling services through you guys? If somebody calls, what does that look like? So those two questions. What does the staffing kind of look like there? And then the second question is, what would a referral look like to send someone over to potentially not have to pay for services, to pay for the resource? But again, if you guys are billing down for Medicaid at this point and possibly even Medicare now, so what does that all look like?
Yes, great questions, Melissa. So what it is right now is that we have clinical staff on staff, LCSWs, LSWs, LPPs, and then also interns from different programs that we have that supervise that we supervise clinically the service delivery. The referrals that we get of direct for counseling, we're not accepting, because what's happened is because of the range of services that we provide, our drivers that are providing transportation, our meal program, that we're actually overwhelmed by our internal referrals because they're identifying those individuals. So when we get an individual that's let's say in our home delivered program who comes forward and the driver of that program or the volunteer says something's changed with Maria's ways that she's presenting, I don't know what it is, can we get some support? Then what would happen is that our resource navigator will, in most cases, will go out and visit with the individual and see what's happening. And then that's when the resource navigator will activate one of our therapists to do that full inventory of the biopsychosocial, and then we'll activate counseling or other case management supports clinically. What this means is a little bit different for those of you, and I know all of you are familiar with PACE, Program of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. One of the things about the PACE program, it really is it's meant to be a full wraparound model of care, all coordinated with one physician that's kind of guiding a geriatrician that's guiding all that support. And the reason why that happens is because you don't want things kind of splintering off and then this person is confused or not getting the best care. So what we do is our clinician becomes what's called a care coordinator. They're the ones that are evaluating, and then essentially they're prescribing how our resource navigator, how our case management, how our nutrition or transportation coming together so that they're bringing the clinical piece forward, activating the therapy when it's needed, or coordinating with all those other adjunct services. I would love to be able to grow the model for more referrals to come externally, but again, we just don't have the resources at this point. And to answer the question about Medicaid and Medicare, so what's happened with Medicaid and Medicare, many of the things that I've brought forward before around the complexity of Medicaid and Medicare, you may have an individual in our community, I can give you many, many examples, where an individual is 63 years old and maybe has had a long-term history of mental health. And they've been activating the mental health system under Medicaid for years, and then they get to 65. Here's where the happy birthday present is. The state of Colorado believes that when somebody turns 65, they have the full psychiatric benefit of Medicare available. Therefore, they don't need the Medicaid benefit. Now, the problem with that is the Medicare benefit does not cover case management clinically for therapeutic services. It doesn't cover the resource navigation needed. It doesn't cover the activity centers that are available. All of those softer services that are functional for older adults aren't covered anymore. So that's where it comes back to this to Silver Key to manage all of those needs. So what we're doing now is we're trying to impress upon the state, and we just had a meeting last week, that the full opportunity of all those codes for all those type of services should be available to older adults regardless if they turn 65. So I'm actively advocating for that. Don't know if it's going to happen. And then Medicare had recently opened up what's called G codes. The G codes are all of the social determinants of health codes. Social determinants of health include transportation, nutrition, work, volunteering, therapy codes, all the prevention codes. The problem is it just opened and we have not yet figured out, nobody's figured out nationally, how do you fully maximize those codes? Because what needs to happen there is to be able to have a billing mechanism and the oversight of a physician to be able to move those codes forward. That's the weakness there. So I think that the codes becoming available, if they will allow for social workers to be able to activate those codes, then we've got an opportunity. But right now, it's just a wait and see. I mean, we think it's been a long time to be able to change the Older Americans Act and reauthorize. Changing Medicare, that's a whole other animal. But the good news is the platform is there. Does that help?
It's not a problem for dually. I mean, those people that were on Medicaid and then they're ready for Medicare. If they're income eligible, they can still get both.
You're
right?
absolutely right in that statement, but I will tell you where it becomes a problem. So the demographic that we serve, it's perceptual. They perceive that Medicaid is welfare. And once they're at 65, even if they qualify for Medicaid, they choose not to apply for Medicaid. And I think you've seen that at Independence.
Yeah.
So that's why we added benefits in action to be co-located at Silver Key at their pantry. Because when people are coming to the pantry, they obviously qualified for the low income status with what we have with the pantry with Karen Share. I'm saying, I'm looking at you, Karen Share, but you know, those criteria that they qualify. So that's why we're linking them with benefits in action so that they can activate more care. I mean, this runs into problems when we talk about transportation and how non-emergency medical transport should be available to most. But if they choose not to apply because they think it's welfare, then we run into the problem that we have we have a reduced access to care because of that. And so I think that there's a lot of those dual eligible opportunity, but we have to do a lot to be able to reframe what does it mean to be able to qualify for the benefits that you qualify for, not necessarily the benefits you've earned, and yet arguably somebody who's been part of this community and has been part, and maybe not didn't have pensions or didn't have retirements. Still, I think that it's an earned benefit in that regard. But a lot of people would argue with me, no, that's the state picking up the gap that they didn't choose to do. I don't know if I agree with that, but that is the perception, and we do run into many people that
And
don't
we
want
must
to.
be concerned about overall, just what's going to happen with Medicaid and Medicare with the new administration, I would imagine.
So one of the things that I am most concerned about with the transition of the federal system is really the unknowns is probably more scary than the realities. And I think that that's one of the challenges that we have is a lot of people have so much anxiety. The people that we serve, especially those that are bound at home, are just consuming so much information from television and news and it creates the anxiety. That's some of the pressures that we're getting, Melissa, when we get those referrals internally, and especially for our home delivered folks, they're just taking it all in, and they're so anxious about what happens if they take away my Social Security, what happens if they take away my Medicare, what happens if they take, and I mean, I'm even getting anxious talking about it. But that's what the problem is. It's really about the perceptual versus reality. Once reality hits, whatever that is, I think we'll be able to navigate through it. It is going to be a while, and we'll have to, but I think we can get on the front end of it where the opportunity presents, like with the Medicare G codes and the Medicaid system, to be able to change the perception that you really can qualify for this now. Why wouldn't you? Those are two pieces that I think we can do today.
Great.
This is Maria. And are are there going to be more opportunities for people to learn more about the Medicaid, Medicare system? Because there's so much confusion. And like you were saying, at the Independence Center, we run into a lot of people who straight out refuse to even talk about Medicaid because they are so worried and scared about their financial situation or what may happen. And so that's one thing we've been trying to do a little bit more is educate people on, no, you don't need to worry about this piece, but this piece could really help you. And so I don't know if I know that you do like the lunch and learns for Medicare, but if that's going to continue.
Yeah, that is going to continue. Great question. That is going to continue. And I think that probably one of the major challenges, which is the population that you also support, it's not those that are the lowest of the low income, and it's not those that are the highest, it's the gap in between because they're worried about the spend down. What I have to get rid of my house, I have to get rid of my car. So there's a lot of myth versus reality. And I think that what we need to do is be more intentional, which I know that with the senior insurance program under the AAA, I think that would be great to be able to bring them in and really start to identify what are the true realities of this versus the myth, because there are some different strategies that people can do. The problem is you have to invest in it a little bit, but it opens up a whole lot more opportunity if they choose to do that, to be able to create trusts and that type of thing so that they can contain some of that in a different environment that allows for them to be able to qualify. And some don't trust the system. So, but yes, we will continue for sure.
Great.
So thank you for all that really good information. And I kind of want to just circle back for a second.
Okay.
And maybe while I continue to talk, maybe other RAC members might have questions too. But so around behavioral health, it's interesting. Again, we're trying to create a flyer. It is created, but it keeps needing to be updated that talks about all the services and how to refer. And so like UCCS's, family caregiver program and the types of counseling that they provide is also kind of its own wraparound. Like you have to be a UCCS, you have to have gone in to, become a client/patient with them in order to access the services that we kind of pay for. So that's kind of its own wraparound closed service too. And so, it's interesting, and that's already on the flyer. And so it's interesting for me to think about how we can be wording that because, we have people that answer phones here. You guys have people that answer phones there. 211 has folks that are answering phones. And so how to figure out what is the best, kind of strategy to refer people, if potentially anxiety and, kind of needing those supports is one of the best things to kind of do. We had, so Dr. Sherry Gibson with the Pikes Peak Elder Justice Center is now doing, counseling through that program, and that's paid through a different grant to make that program happen. And then we have Pearls, which is 19 visits that people can have. And so those are, two kind of open-ended resources that are still out there. And of course, the Elder Justice Center is not even on our sheet because AAA doesn't fund that. So
Right.
that's like a whole different, so like I'm thinking, do we need a behavioral health, flyer that kind of talks about and can showcase, what it looks like? Because even though people might be able to get behavioral health through Medicare or Medicaid, finding a provider, when people are really down and out, they're not going to do it. So it's so important that they can, contact, an organization that supports older adults, and that organization can say, here you go, and I think that's so valuable. And then as part of the counseling, they can be working towards, how do I, figure out how to access a provider in the community that'll take my Medicare or Medicaid. There's more and more providers out there, but many of them are virtual. And sometimes that's a great resource, but then sometimes it's really not. And so just even trying to find the best behavioral health provider is an interesting, challenge for people who are, just super down and out. So I'm just going to throw that out there for people to think about, and for me to recognize that I have to look at our flyer a little differently between now and the next quarterly provider meeting, to kind of be updating that and making sure that, we don't, set somebody up for, hoping that they might get counseling and, they really need to have. But I guess, they could get referred over to Silver Key just to need help in general.
Yeah, and if they get referred, we're not going to turn anybody away. It's just that we've got the challenges of capacity, of course, like everybody else, but refer those folks, and we will get a resource navigator, case manager involved, and then they're open to our system, and then they can be referred for that deeper, support if needed. But we really, because of the resources we have and our limitations, we want to be on the front end of that. So that's where I would refer, and, we'll do our best to be able to navigate through, because we do have a different approach than pure counseling, like the Pearls program and the Lane Center with what they do. Ours is not, we have therapy available. Ours is a brief solution focused therapy model. So it's really more, if anybody has an EAP program in their businesses, it's like a 3 to 6 session kind of counseling support. So it's situational. It manages that support there. What we know when we work with older adults, oftentimes it's not the therapy that's going to make a difference. It's how do you manage the system around them. That's why our therapist is really guiding and supporting. How does case management and resource navigation become more effective? So in those situations, that would be maybe the filter that I would use. If you think that this is really a systems management issue that clinically would benefit from somebody kind of championing the cause that way, then we'd be the right agency for that. That's what makes us a little bit different than the other two, if that helps.
It does help a lot.
And then there's one other thing, Melissa, on the document. If it's only AAA funded, then probably this wouldn't make sense. Although arguably the fire department, now that they're involved, that would be one that I would add to that.
It's on there now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But the other piece is the Diversis Health, the Crisis Center. So one of the things about that is that it's available regardless of funder. Now, here's what I've been meeting with the Diversis team. So for those of you who aren't aware, the Diversis organization is the largest community mental health provider here in this community. And it has the designation, before everything has changed, as the safety net provider for mental health needs. They have what's called a crisis system. And it's about the language. So a senior may say, I'm not really in crisis, but I need help. Here's the thing is, they can't turn anybody away for that initial evaluation. Now, what they don't do yet in the entirety, but they're trying to, is evaluate Medicare. They do have some Medicare providers. It's limited. But if somebody goes to the crisis center and they do have a need and they triage to the outpatient there, that's actually opening up an opportunity for care. Again, it's a bit of a workaround, but I might suggest to include the crisis center and the crisis hotline. Awesome. and I think that'll help round it out, Melissa, because I do think that's what the challenge is that what I love about this conversation and the fact that counseling is even available in the AAA contract is huge, but it's a small dollar, because the reality is older adults are the forgotten ones in the community. They've lived a full life. Certainly they don't have anxiety. Certainly they don't have depression. Just get over it, for gosh sakes. You've lived to be 90. What could you possibly be anxious about? stop it. There's a lot to, I'm anxious and I'm not 90 yet. And so that's the kind of piece that I think we need to be mindful of, is that even if they're not AAA funded, they really are regardless of funder. And that's what I would include maybe on the document, is anybody that provides regardless of funder. That would be maybe a helpful solution to think through.
And I think it's important that seniors know the language that they have to use when they call these places, so that they don't get turned away.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes they don't want to admit that they're having a crisis, or, you know, and so then they get turned away when they really could be helped.
Yeah, we learned that very early on, that we needed to change some of the name. Like, we used to have a depression support counseling group. Well, nobody showed. But when we changed it, you got the blues group. Guess what? People showed up. It's like, okay, I got the blues. I'm not depressed, but I've got the blue. Those are the kind of things culturally we need to be more intentional about.
Mhm.
And a lot of systems are. I mean, Silver Key, with all the great things that we do, you know, we have to learn in that too. So that would be the other thing, is to be culturally responsive.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you all.
It's
I know that
very
was a lot more than. Take care.
It's very enlightening. So we'll move on under information items to B, which is our membership subcommittee. And I think, Maria, you have a couple of things you're going to tell us or talk about.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Melissa, please correct me if I say any of this incorrectly, but I believe we do have somebody interested in becoming our vice chair. And so that would be Laura Chronic. And other than that, I don't believe we have any other updates. Oh, and we have two certificates of appreciation. One is for Joe Ruth for outstanding service to the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments and the Area Agency on Aging. And then also for Bill Bowles, he's also getting the certificate of appreciation. So we truly appreciate all the work that you both have done.
Thanks, Maria. And in terms of our executive committee, with Laura Chronic being interested in being the vice chair, we will be voting on this at the January meeting. So RAC members, be thinking about, if you want to be on the executive committee, we need a chair, a vice chair, and a second vice chair. As I say that, our current chair, Debbie, is willing to step up and continue for another year. And then Laura is interested in being vice chair, which then would ultimately cycle her in to be chair, her kind of third year on the RAC, which is really ideal and great. And so we still need a second vice chair, because Bill Bowles actually served as the second vice chair. And so he is, he'll be doing other things, supporting Park County officially starting in January. So we are still going to be kind of thinking about who would be a good fit to be a second vice chair. And in terms of the roles that happen, and it has happened, we have had our chair have to step down for one reason or another, and our vice chair stepped up. That's exactly how Debbie ended up becoming the chair. So thank you. We have had times where both the chair and vice chair are not at a meeting, and then the second vice chair has to run the meeting. So just know that that's kind of part of what happens. We haven't seen that, I think, in a long, long time, where we've had both our chair and vice chair out. So for those of you who might want to be a second vice chair, you're probably not going to get hit up to run the meeting, but just know that that's kind of how that works. And I think that's all. So thank you for sharing about Bill, Maria, and Joe, and I'll make sure that they get their certificates. And so I think that's all I might need to add. We'll be voting again on this in January, so please keep your eye out for that.
And Laura will still be able to be the chair of the Strategic Review Committee, even though she's vice chair. But when she becomes chair, which will be in 2026, just think ahead, maybe, we will need another chair for the Strategic Review Committee.
And Melissa, this is, I just had another question. Do we have some flyers that we could get? I think you gave me some a while ago, but just to help tell people about the RAC and see if they have interest in becoming part of the group.
Yep, I think I might have them right here in front. Well, maybe, yeah, I do have them right here in front of me too. Yep. Yeah. So we're good. Okay.
Thank you. Letter D under information items is the TRS subcommittee, and the TRS subcommittee did meet. And hopefully, Melody, you will be able to give us a little bit of a summary of what happened at that meeting.
Sure. So we discussed the carryover options. So this is federal carryover that we're allowed to carry from one state fiscal year into the next. We have done a really great job at spending down our funds, which is the goal to not have carryover, because there are caps on that and potential caps on federal carryover in the future, along with some of the flexibilities that we lost during COVID for programming. Some of that affects our funding with carryover as well. So we're meeting again in January to talk about the final numbers, as Jody was reaching out to providers to talk with them about their spend down and what their potential needs are for the rest of the state fiscal year, as the carryover funds must be spent by June 30th. Our funding comes to us in separate pots. Some of you have seen this around our RFP time. So through Title III with the Older Americans Act, there are different parts. So Part B is supportive services, and that's a catch-all for things like transportation, case management, the bulk of our services. And then there are other funding parts that are very specific to things like nutrition and behavioral health. So some of the carryover funds, it's really straightforward. For instance, Silver Key is our only congregate meal provider, so they receive that carryover. But with the other funding parts, Jody really tries to make the effort to speak with all of our providers about what their funding needs are. Some of them do have, some don't. Some have already spent down all of their funds that we have allocated to them for the state fiscal year and can absolutely use that carryover. So he's still in discussions with some providers, and so that's why we'll have another meeting in January to finalize the carryover amounts for the TRS subcommittee to approve and then come to the full RAC.
Thank you. And I had a little note here for myself that the total amount of the carryover was $385,702, which is a pretty
Small. And for context, probably about 5 years ago, our carryover was at 2 million. And so that's not because we had more funding. It was because we weren't working as closely with our providers to talk about their spending needs and how to strategically move funds when certain parts needed to be spent down. So we've come a really long way with that.
And if I'm correct, about maybe 2/3 of that money is congregate meal.
I don't
nutrition,
remember
a
off the
little
top of my
less,
head.
like two. Yeah, I am correct.
Is it?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, that does go to Silver Key.
Mhm.
But we have to make sure that they're hopefully going to be able to spend that money. We want all of our providers to be able to spend the money by June, I think.
June 30th.
June
Yes.
30th. So
Then that's the end of our
that's
state
part
fiscal
of the
year.
process for figuring out who we're gonna give money to.
Right. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jody is not here, and I don't know if Melody has anything else she wants to add to the director's report.
Sure, yes. And I wanted to make sure, Madam Chair, did we skip strategic review subcommittee update? There may not be any updates for that subcommittee, but I don't remember.
Oh,
if we,
I
don't know that we
forgot
touched
to
on it.
ask. Yeah, I don't have any notes here. That's probably so letter C was strategic review committee. Laura,
I don't think we have any
anything to
updates.
add?
No, we haven't, no updates.
Because I think you gave an update last.
Right, and we haven't met since, so.
Okay, great. Okay, so we'll
Thank
go
you.
down to director's report.
Yeah, so I'll be presenting for Jody as he is attending a U.S. Aging Board of Directors meeting this week. Very important. He has been on that board of directors for, I think, the last 2 years, possibly 3. So he's currently in D.C., and his efforts have really been focused in the last year on the Older Americans Act reauthorization, flexibilities, advocating for flexibilities that we had under COVID, hoping that those will continue, and then also increase funding at the state level. So if there are cuts at the federal level, advocating for more funding through our state legislature and getting approval through our joint budget committee at the state level. So the Older Americans Act, that's what funds Pikes Peak AAA. That comes to us through the State Unit on Aging, and it's up for reauthorization. So the last time it was reauthorized was 2020, and the last time there were major updates was in 1988. So what Jason so eloquently referred to with aging looking different in this day and age than it has in 40, 50 years past, there are a lot of things that need to be updated in there, particularly related to behavioral health, nutrition, and transportation. And so a lot of aging groups, the National Council on Aging, US Aging, they've done incredible work trying to make efforts for advancement, as a lot of things that we are held to with policy and procedure that then impacts our providers comes directly from the Older Americans Act. And so a lot of what we have to do is based on law, and there's not a lot of flexibility around that, which is really frustrating for not just our providers, but us too, with wanting to have as much flexibility in serving older adults. So Jody is meeting with the board of directors in DC for US Aging, and then they're making walk-in visits to our congressional members. So visiting Senate members to encourage them to vote yes on the Older Americans Act reauthorization. So he also wanted to share that RAC members and providers are encouraged to send out, we have a template letter to send to your members of Congress to encourage them also to vote yes. And the goal is to have this reauthorized before the holiday break. And because we have a new administration coming in, the goal is to have this passed before the old administration moves on, because otherwise our efforts will have to start from scratch. And it's been, with the reauthorization, probably 2 years of work, possibly more, with trying to get this moved and trying to get greater flexibility within the act. So that's really where his efforts are focused. What questions do we have?
Do you know if our legislators in Colorado, our congressional and our Senate have supported the Older Americans Act in the past?
In the past, yes, I believe they have. And
So our senators,
most of them have been from the southern part of the state and the northeastern part of the state, the ones that sit on those committees to try to get funding for that. I'm not familiar with any Colorado legislators that have sat on those committees to try to bring that forward to.
so our senators aren't changing, but there have been changes to the congressional,
Yes,
to the congressional delegations.
yes, yes. Yeah. So if you haven't already reached out to your legislator, please do so. The great thing is that there are materials that are available and letters that are already written where you can certainly read through it, but you don't have to be fully versed on all of the changes. I mean, it's a document that's something like 134 pages long. So the Administration for Community Living has some great fact sheets. Some of them are 2 pages, some are 4, that really summarize all of it and just make all of the information a lot more digestible, because it is a lot and it is overwhelming. But certain things that are just really critical that we want to see reauthorized with flexibility, so that the people we were able to serve during COVID and the kind of funding that we had during COVID, we want to see that continue, because people reached out for services, people that we had never been in contact before and had never seen before. And I know Jason can attest to that too, especially with meals. There was a lot that we were able to do. And just because COVID ended doesn't mean that their needs ended. And so that's, I think, the state of things across Colorado for sure, that we hear from other AAAs, and I'm sure likely across the nation as well. So this is really critically important that this reauthorization passes.
So the email that Jody sent out to
Yes.
staff members, did it go out to all the RAC members?
Not yet.
Not yet,
Oh.
but we will.
And,
yeah.
yeah, and if we could do that,
Yeah, and there's a link
great.
in there, just RAC members, so you know, there's a link in there for the template letter. Yes.
And I'm curious if Jody is sending that to our providers. I know he sends a lot of stuff to folks, but maybe.
I don't know that he has, so that's
Maybe-
a good reminder that
yeah, that would
I
be a
can do
good
that.
idea.
Okay.
Yes.
And
I
I'll
will be
send
sure
it
to do that.
the RAC and the Commission on Aging. And I also know that when people have followed through on doing this, oftentimes people have let Jody know that they've sent something. So maybe, if you don't mind, either let Jody know, Melody or I know, so that we can kind of keep track of the fact that people are sending some things. It is really, really encouraging when Jody hears back that somebody has done that. And so please let us know if you had a minute to make that happen. And I'm going to be encouraging the Commission on Aging to do it as well. So
And
hopefully.
something else to add to that too, just to be a second voice for something he mentioned at one of our last meetings, was that he really encourages providers and RAC members, if you want to join him in his efforts at the state level when he goes to Denver, there are opportunities where he does sit before budget committees or to speak directly to our legislators to talk about the critical need for funding, because our state funding follows a little bit of a different cycle. And so we often don't know until late spring what's going to happen July 1st. And so there's still time to, in the early spring, for RAC members to be part of that and to join him. And I know that he would love that, just that there are more voices and diverse voices, and not just the director's voice, but people who are directly impacted by this. So if you or anyone you know would like to join him, I know that he would really appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The last item on there is my chair report. And I guess what I want to do is wish everybody happy holiday. But I also want to thank everyone on this committee because we're small. We don't have that many members right now, but we are mighty because we do a lot. We do a lot of different activities and things to provide input into this agency and what they do for, who they want to fund and what they want to do. So I just want to thank everybody again for all of their assistance and help and attendance at these meetings, and picking up for doing other kinds of things, for being chair, vice chair, heads of the various committees. So I again thank you all very, very much for your time and your energy. Okay, I don't think we have any discussion items. And just lastly, I just mentioned that this meeting today was actually our November and our December meeting, so that our next RAC meeting will be January 23rd. And I just want to mention that we usually have our RAC executive meeting the first Wednesday of the month, but that is New Year's Day. I happened to look it up. So we may want to consider changing that, and I'll leave that up to you, Melissa, to think about whether, unless everybody who attends that meeting who's here says that they think they're going to be around, and then we can just we do it by Zoom. So okay, so we'll try to find another date for that. And then I know that the PPACG meeting is coming up next week, I think. I usually look at that meeting and I go through the pages, but this month it has 600 pages to it. So, but you don't have to attend the meeting. I mean, you can Zoom into the meeting, but sometimes just looking at all that this committee looks at and reviews is really interesting. And what's on their plate and all of that stuff. And with that, I will ask for adjournment. Anybody else have anything else before we take a vote to adjourn? Okay. Say aye.
Aye.
We will adjourn. Thank you.